Good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Horan. It is October the 11th, 2014. I'm at the Hall of Fame celebration at Raeford, North Carolina. I'm at the Raeford drop zone, and I'm going to tell you a few stories and a little bit about myself. I started jumping after my first tour from Viet Nam in 1963, August the 20th particularly. At the time I was considering three kinds of activity. I thought I'd like to start flying, or I'd like to start karate, or I'd like to start skydiving. Well, my boss that I worked with was a member of the Quantico Parachute Club, and he convinced me that I needed to go out and be a real man and make a skydive, which I did. And within a couple of days, and this was on a Friday night, he trained me for about an hour and a half, basically how to get out of the helicopter, how to recognize a malfunction, how to steer the canopy, and how to land appropriately. And I guess I did real well because I made my second jump that same day, and it's sort of been uphill all the way. I'm a lifetime member of USPA. My last jump was yesterday. I made a tandem jump, and that was my first jump in 14 years. But I jumped over 35 years. I've got 3,202 jumps now. I've got instructor, jump master, license ratings, and couple of 36-hour free fall badge, and a few other things like that. But one story I'd like to tell is that when I started with the Quantico Parachute Club in 1963, I found out that I was the youngest person in the club. I was the lowest ranked person in the club, and of course I had no jumps, so I was a complete nobody. 2 years later, before I left the Marine Corps, I was still the youngest person. I was still the lowest ranked in the club, but I had more jumps than anybody. I had a jump master instructor rating. I was a club jump master and instructor. I was also CSO for a while, and I was an ASO for a while. And this club was basically right next door to the Officer Candidate School in Quantico, so we had a lot of officers in the club. And I think maybe we had 5 or 6 people that were enlisted like I was. But when we were on the drop zone, everybody was on a first-name basis, which I found kind of difficult because we had a one-star general, we had several colonels, and calling them by their first name was pretty awkward at the time. But Colonel Bill Shaver, that got me started in all this, eventually became not only my commanding officer, but a best friend, mentor. He accepted me into his family, and I used to have meals with his family, on a pretty regular basis. So that was real cool. One of the things that I did in the Marine Corps, which may sound a little implausible, but I did it anyway. Within I think it was about a 4-month stretch, I was in 3 airplane crashes. And of course I survived those. And the people that were in them, the crashes with me, nobody got seriously hurt. We had a few sprained ankles. But the first one was a Marine Corps R4D, which everybody knows as a DC-3. That got going belly up down the runway, and we all got out of the airplane. And I don't remember jumping out, although I was the jump master, but it was about a 12-foot jump. And I just jumped out like it was nothing. Fell over, I had my gear on. We were jumping B-4 containers, C9 canopies, the old twill reserves, and I ran like hell to get away from the airplane. And I got with some other people about 100 yards away, and we were all standing around, and then the plane exploded. Boom! And I'm saying to this guy next to me, I said, boy, am I glad I wasn't in that when it went up. He says, hell, me too. And I looked down at the top of his reserve, and he had his seatbelt on, and it was still connected, and he had pulled us out of the bulkhead, out of the floor of the airplane, and there were 2 bolts that he had pulled out. He was a big guy, but it just goes to show you that when the adrenaline's pumping, you can do just about anything you want to do. My second airplane crash was a helicopter. We jumped out of the UH-34D, I think the name of it was. But we were up about 600 or 700 feet. The airplane, the helicopter, lost power. The pilot auto-rotated us back to the ground, and we hit with a thump that just about knocked my teeth out. And of course, we were too low to jump. The foundation of the helicopter split. The rotors all snapped off, and the plane was destroyed. And I'll tell you, I was more glad to get out of that one because I knew that I had no chance of jumping. Several months later, in one of my first civilian jumps, I went to Manassas and was taking a load of students up in a Cessna 180. And we got up about 800, 900 feet, and the engine lost power. And the pilot said, "We're going in. I'll do the best I can." And I'm kneeling in front of the first student thinking, wait a minute, I've done this before, third time, and I really got panicked. I thought, this is it. And there was no place to go but the forest and the trees. So this pilot flew right straight into the trees to a clearing that he had spotted, and he landed down and went through two big trees, knocks the wings off, and we come to a screeching halt, and it was over. And we're all sitting there really kind of dumbfounded, and all I could think to say was, well, thank God. Thank God for miracles. And I thanked the pilot, and we all got out, and we walked back to the drop zone, wearing our gear, and praising God that we had lived. And that was my third time. And interestingly, I've been very close to two other crashes by one jump load. Once, one before a crash, and one jump load after a crash. So I consider that pretty interesting. But anyway, I jumped for about 35 years, and I love to go to different drop zones. I love to jump out of any kind of airplane that I could jump out of. And I think I jumped out of close to 40 of them while I was skydiving. I also had the #1 goal in my life at that time after I got out of the Marine Corps was to become an educated person. And I did that. I finally got a bachelor's degree. I eventually got a master's degree. And in 1981, I got a doctorate. So education was always kind of butting heads with skydiving. And sometimes skydiving won, sometimes education won. But I regret none of this at all. I love skydiving. It's the best people in the world. And I have to tell you one of the funniest stories. Fortunately, I got accepted as a jump master and instructor with the Orange Parachute Center in Orange, Massachusetts. And this was in March of 1967. I actually wrote Lee Guilfoyle, who was the training officer, a handwritten letter asking to be considered for this job. And I listed my number of jumps and my training and that. And about 10 days later, I get a letter through the mail, and I'm thinking, oh, that was quick. And it was an acceptance. It totally astounded me. He said, you're accepted for training, be at Lakewood on this date, and we'll start training. You're going to be, ended up working in Massachusetts at the Orange Parachute Center. And that's what we did. I went to Lakewood Parachute Center. Had to take a bus because my 58 Ford broke down, and I left it on the Beltway around Washington, D.C. But during 1967, one of my first classes, and there were about 50 people in the class, I finished with all of them. We did our practice landings, took everybody out to the flight line. We got chuted up, and we checked their tickets. We checked all their equipment. And I'm thinking things are really good. I'm feeling really good. And then this guy comes over to me, really, really mad. And he's got a big pair of rigger scissors in his hands. And I looked at him and I said, oh, hi. And I'm paraphrasing, he says, hi hell, boy. He says, you get that shit off your rig. And what I had on the back of my rig, on the bottom part, was a Tony the Tiger tail, which at the time you could get them out of Kellogg's cereals. And I wore that in the Marine Corps for a year, year and a half. Had it on several rigs. And the Marine Corps never said anything about it. And he came up and cut that tail off and says, I don't ever want to see you doing that around here. That's not how we do things. And I said, well, it was all right in the Marine Corps. He said, well, then you get your goddamn ass back to the Marine Corps if you want to have a tail on your pack, but you're not doing it here. And so I was kind of irritated at that point. I was really upset. I felt humiliated in front of all my students. And this one girl said, what the hell was that all about? Are you still going to be our jump master? I said, yes, I am. And that guy just didn't like it. And she said, well, who is that guy? And I said, that is Lew Sanborn D1. He is the most important person at the Orange Parachute Center. He's the most important person practically in all of skydiving. And I couldn't think of anything to say that was anything important other than, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. And you know what? I talked to him about that a couple of days ago. And I asked him if he remembered that. And he said, no, I didn't remember that. And he said, what's your name? And I said, it's Mike Horan. And he took my hat off. Oh, so you're Mike Horan. I couldn't even hardly recognize you. He says, I do remember a little bit about that. Well, he didn't stay mad at me very long. And we became good friends over the years, although hardly ever saw him after I left Orange. But it reminded me that appearances matter. And if you're going to be a professional skydiver like I was, you had to look the part, you had to dress the part, and you had to act the part. And Tony the Tiger Tail on your rig, my new security crossbow piggyback, was not the place to do that. So I accepted that, and I accepted my judgment. And later that evening, when we were down at Mike's Bar and Grill, and this subject came up, and everybody was laughing about this and making fun of me, and I realized they really do like me, and they're just having fun, and that's just the way skydivers are. So I eventually got over it, and was the better person for it. So that's about all I want to talk about at this point. Those are three kind of stories that come to mind about my life in skydiving. But I enjoyed it. The worst jump I ever had was a broken ankle, and it was all my fault. I had a few sprains and a few bruises, but hell of a ride, hell of a ride. So anyway, thank you for letting me sit here and talk with you and tell a few jump stories. Goodbye.